Hello, hello, hello. I don't know why I have to greet you with multiple hellos, but hopefully it makes you feel welcome rather than irritating you. Um, so I was just looking through my little list of prompts for things that I wanted to do little videos about. And today's kind of inspired by something I read yesterday when I was on a social media platform, and I saw a post that was, I think the intention of it was as a kind of inspiring thing. It was, I'm not going to name who the person was because it was a very good post, and it was, it definitely met the thing that it had intended to. So it was quite an inspiring thing, and there was some good lessons in it. And it was about partly about a family member um, beating the odds of of a very severe medical condition. And there was a little bit of it that I wouldn't say I took exception with. I just thought I felt like I needed to provide an alternative perspective. So it was the usual thing that comes up of, the doctors just said that my relative was not going to pull through, and we should prepare ourselves for the worst. And then ultimately the person survived, which is is great. And I had uh, but I posted something on it. I weighed it up. I don't generally get too involved in these things, especially if I know that offering an alternative perspective is going to basically just end up in me being piled on, and I have zero interest in that happening these days. So I posted something along the lines of, great post, really good message because it's true, and I had just offered, an insight from my perspective as someone who's broken a lot of bad news over the years, and just to try and bust a few of the things that I think are myths about it. About how it's generally done badly. I don't think that's a myth necessarily. I think sometimes it is done badly. It's a very difficult thing to do well. That we're writing people off. I think that is a massive myth. I think that what really goes on there is that we're having to paint a realistic picture, and I always used to say this to people as well, particularly if families, and they often would say, "Is there no chance that they'll get better?" And I would say to them generally, or what I learned to say to them was, "There's always a small chance." Um, but the outcome is not looking good based on the information that I've got available to me. There is always a chance, and I personally will be very happy to be proven wrong. And I always felt that that was a little bit of a panacea to this whole perspective that they've defied the doctor's odds, the doctors had written them off, and that's not really what we're doing a lot of the time. It's certainly not, not from my perspective. I can't speak for every doctor in the land, but we were generally continuing with some form of appropriate treatment at the time, but painting an appropriately bleak picture on the basis of what we felt was the most likely outcome. And then what would happen? There's a range of outcomes possible then, isn't there? Either what you say will come true, which would happen most of the time, but it certainly wasn't, it wasn't 100%. And I genuinely was always very, very happy to be proven wrong. But yeah, there was a bit of an undertone to it of, this whole kind of thing that popped out around the Brexit campaign time, wasn't it? Oh, we're all sick, fed up of listening to experts, and the same thing that was evident during the pandemic as well. We don't want to listen to these supposed experts. We'll do our own research, and that's fine, and that's absolutely fine. But yeah, it got me thinking a little bit. So I kind of posted that, and it's been absolute radio silence since. I half expected I would at least get the odd dig in the ribs about it. Because there was another undercurrent which I won't get into around it either, which was around there was a do not resuscitate thing, and that's not really something I'm going to get into in this type of content. But let's just say that that's a campaign that the medical community has lost in terms of being able to communicate with the general public about resuscitation. So I think someone had scanned some of the other comments against my better judgment, and I think there was definitely at least one saying it was shocking that that decision was made to not resuscitate. And I think in the context of someone who's got a very severe condition of sorts, if they deteriorate to the point where they need resuscitation, the chances of them then surviving are, you know, absolute minimum. And then you've got to be thinking about is, do you really want me to be spending the last moments of your loved one's life pushing up and down on the chest? It's a very, very traumatic process for the people involved in it, for the person themselves, and for anyone that happens to witness it as well. But that's a debate for another day. But yeah, I thought that was another narrative that often pops up in this. It's shocking that they just gave up on that person, and that's not what happens. But yeah, so that's 5 minutes of me explaining, of giving the background, and really what I wanted to talk about was decision making, and how we make decisions as doctors and as diagnosing healthcare professionals, of which there are a few different types now. And it's not quite what you think. And I don't quite know what non diagnosing healthcare professionals think goes on, but I just wanted to kind of talk through my mental process of making a decision and how that kind of applies to general decision making day to day. So I always kind of regarded what I did for the last decade and beyond as one of the purest forms of um, patient consultation that there is in medicine. So you're taking someone who potentially hasn't seen anyone else coming to your door. You're the first healthcare professional to see them, so you get to formulate a completely unfiltered opinion of what's going on with them, which is actually quite unusual in sort of A&E and the emergency department, and general practice are probably the only places in the NHS where that happens. Um, they come to you, and you have your senses at your disposal really, and the main ones you're going to be using are your eyes. So an experienced practitioner is going to be taking in things with their eyes about how that person's moving, how they're what their colouring is like, how are they breathing, how are they moving, how do they sound. And you're going to be listening to what they tell you as well, because I think it might have been an Osler quote. I can't remember precisely, but usually, the patient is telling you the diagnosis is the famous quote. I think it might be Osler. And that's true the majority of the time. So asking questions and listening to what the person is telling you will most of the time give you a very good indication of what may or may not be going on. And then we're trying to, we're setting a threshold then of how do we decide at what point we think we know what's going on, or we're happy that we don't know what's going on, but we know it's nothing serious, and that will be very variable. So we have certain thresholds set in our head, or depending on what the problem is that they're presenting with. So there'll be certain conditions that are associated with life-threatening problems. So chest pain is going to be the classic one. There are others, but I won't get into it. So we're thinking, actually, can I confidently, on the basis of what I know about this person and purely on the basis of what I can see and what they're telling me, exclude significant disease or pathology at this stage? And really, we're just constantly striving to get to that point. At what point have I made a firm diagnosis, or I have said I don't really know what's going on, but I've excluded all the things to worry about? And it might be, the tools at my disposal then are I can ask more questions on the basis of what I've already been told and what I can see, or I need to seek additional information. So things like, vital signs, blood pressure, breathing rate, heart rate, oxygen saturations, all of these things that can be done just by putting a straightforward piece of equipment onto someone's body. Do I need to be requesting other tests like a tracing of the heart? And that would probably be mandatory 99 times out of 100 in someone who presents with like chest pain or abdominal pain. Do I need to be ordering blood tests to rule things out? So I'm just thinking, where do I need to set the benchmark here of confident exclusion of something bad going on? So it's just that constant setting and resetting on the basis of a lot of information. And so, because there's a lot of variables involved, that means that there's a lot of potential moving pieces that can go wrong. And this is where I think there's a very poor understanding of what's involved here, because it's very rarely definitive. Nothing in our lives is that you make the best possible decision on the basis of the information you have available to you at the time. And that's really where it links back to that scenario I was describing before, where someone who, to all intents and purposes, appears to be dying, and the doctor then is fulfilling their purpose of, I'm doing the best thing I can for this person, is that I'm, doing whatever I need to do to keep them comfortable. I am preparing the family for a very realistic outcome here, which is not the same as giving up on them. And yeah, sometimes that decision making process, over time, a lot of these variables can change. So a lot of the moving parts can change. And as a result, a condition that was maybe not evident at the initial time of speaking to the person has evolved or changed in some way, and now there's something a bit more there's a bit more obvious, something a bit more obvious than what was going on before. And that's why we will often say to people, we will do something called safety netting, where we'll say, at the moment, on the basis of the information I have available to me, it does not appear that there's anything significant wrong. It may be X non-worrying diagnosis, but if A, B, or C happens, then you need to go and see someone about it, and that might be come back and see me again. And that's really, really important to make sure that people know, oh, well, I can't bother the doctor again because they said it was fine. Things change over time. And that approach hasn't seen me wrong too many times. And I think you can apply a similar principle to the decisions that you're making on a daily basis. You're trying to evaluate all of the options that are available to you. You're trying to work out what the best way forward is. That isn't perfect either, but I guess the potential consequences generally are not quite as severe. You're not worried about someone dying generally on the basis of the decisions that you're making on a daily basis. But I think we have a very poor relationship with risk and uncertainty, which is really what you're dealing with in these kind of situations in all decisions. If you are looking for an option that is 100% certain, then you're probably not going to make decisions very confidently in your life. We need to get some acceptance of the fact that what we're dealing with on a daily basis is risk and probability. So I don't want to talk for any longer because this has ended up being quite a long video, because I spent 5 minutes of it talking about this scenario that slightly irked me yesterday. But I did think it was a great post, though. There was a great message in it, but I just think that maybe the quote-unquote experts in it were used as the sacrificial lamb slightly. And I was a little bit disappointed that no one has kind of engaged with my alternative explanation from the quote-unquote expert's point of view, as someone who's had to break bad news to people hundreds of times, and I know what a hard task it is. And I've certainly had my fair share of people bounce back after I've said, oh look, I'm not sure that, I think that this might be their last trip to hospital, their last illness, or something along those lines. But yeah, just remember, all decision making is done with the benefit of the information that's available to people at the time, and that is okay, as long as that's the best possible decision at that moment in time. That's about the best you can ask for. But just have a little think about what's your own level of comfort with risk and uncertainty, and is your lack of ability to engage with that holding you back from actually making decisions to allow you to move past the barrier that you're at this moment in time? Okay, let me know what you think.